the man whose ideas and message and now his delegates are on equal footing to combat the establishment of the Republican Party. Here now, Texas Republican Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman Paul, it's a pleasure. Congratulations on the numbers you achieved last night in Iowa.
Thank you, Judge. Good to be with you.
What is your road to the Republican nomination as you see it?
I think you've hinted as to what it is. I mean, it's getting the delegates, and you have to, win the primaries or win these caucuses. But there are some that are going to be more difficult than others. Some states are very, very big, and then you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, which we won't have, although we have a very strong donor base, but they are small donors, so we have to depend on that. So it is going to the smaller states and looking at the caucus states and do our very best in all the states possible, but I think we got the boost that we needed, and we're feeling good about where we're going from there.
What can you do to remind Republican voters that you are the only game changer, that all the other Republican candidates agree on, in one form or another, basically on the status quo as it is or as it was when George W. Bush was president?
Well, what would be encouraging if, our large rallies, we had large rallies out in Iowa, sometimes over 1,000, sometimes 1,400 people. And responses, a lot of responses came on the foreign policy, bringing our troops home, the civil liberties, the Patriot Act. They inevitably, whether I was in a Republican group or independents or what, they know about the Patriot Act, and they also know about this National Defense Authorization Act, which really impressed me because so many would even bring it up and ask questions about it. And the responses there are fantastic. But you don't hear that on the news. They don't report that. And if they would know that, they would see that there's a bit of a difference because the rest are supportive of the status quo. They're not talking about civil liberties. They're talking about, an aggressive foreign policy of moving troops around the war and occupation and changing the internal governments of other nations. And even when they talk about fiscal conservatism, they're not really talking about it.
Right.
They're talking about tinkering on the edges and cutting a little bit of the increases. Right. Of course, I have a proposal to really cut the budget.
Yours is the only proposal that will cut the budget. In fact, you want to cut $1 trillion in the first year. If we cut the $1 trillion in the first year of your presidency, you could probably run the federal government without having to borrow any more money. If that were so, what would that mean for the economy?
Well, I think, there's a lot of psychology in economics, and, you need to restore confidence. You have to get better policy. You restore, the psychology and the confidence. That would help. I think just changing foreign policy, it would change the psychology. If all of a sudden they started seeing our troops here at home rather than going into Australia and these different places. Now they're adding countries into all over Africa and looking at Syria and Iran. If that psychology would be changed and that we'd be spending either that money at home or letting the people spend that money, I think that would give a real boost. But we need to get the people to spend the money. We need to quit monetizing debt. We need the market to operate. We need contracts back again.
Right.
We need, market interest rates, all the things that we used to have, but we gave up on about 100 years ago.
Last week, I was off, and almost every place I went out in northwest New Jersey, a very conservative Republican area where I live, people came up to me and said, I like Ron Paul, but I'm worried about his foreign policy. If you had been standing next to me when those folks said that to me, what would you have said back to them?
Well, I might have started with a question and asking, what are you worried about? And what they usually talk about is they're afraid I'm not strong on national defense. And I tell them that just spending money overseas as military spending, it may well distract from national defense. And I would use Republicans like Eisenhower warning about the military-industrial complex, and Robert Taft, how he warned about getting into NATO, and that we should be spending this money at home. But the one thing that to pay more attention to is they think that if you don't vote for the money and for the wars and everything, you're against the troops. But when you give them the statistic that I get twice as much money as the other candidates from active military duties, I said, why doesn't that count for something? And they pay a lot of attention to that.
Congressman Paul, congratulations on the victory last night. We'll see you in New Hampshire. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
As for the other candidates,